All right, Adam, I can't believe that you are finally here with me on the Soul Driven podcast. It's so cool because I feel like we were connected through a mutual friend back in 2020. And then we just had this massively long conversation. You had your podcast going, I think, full blast then, right?
Yeah, I think we were just getting ready to wrap the season, the
Yeah.
2020 season. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were both like, okay, we've got to interview each other and all the things. And then, like, boom, it's 2022 and it's just now happening.
I know. Yeah, the pandemic, boy, it put a stop to a lot of things now, didn't it?
It's just so wild to me. It's like, I've been running into friends, oh gosh, over the past couple of weeks. And it's like, it's literally been years since I've seen you, you
Yeah,
know? And that's just
yeah.
the wildest thing. I think we're all kind of reeling in regards to like, what has happened? Like, and now we're kind of like coming back out. Maybe like, obviously, all of us are in different places. Here in Wilmington, it's like super safe. So, Wilmington never even really got hit that hard. So, which was weird in the midst of it. But now I'm just like, okay, the back to life. I don't know. It's very strange. Um,
Yeah.
Either way, I am so pumped to finally have you here with me so we can geek out. So thank you for being
Yes.
here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, of course, I have like a million questions for you because Adam, you've done so many different things. You do so many different things. You're like my spirit animal. Because I like doing so many different things too. But of course, I always start off with my question: what makes you soul driven?
That's a great question. When I think about what it means to be soul driven, I think in order to really in order to truly be soul driven, it begins with knowing who we are, right? And I like to give this, I like to share this analogy of a stream, and within the stream there are multiple whirlpools, right? Or let's just imagine it as a river, and you're on a whitewater raft and you're going down a river, and all of a sudden you see a whirlpool in front of you, and oh, look at that whirlpool, we better go right through the middle of it or we're going to get sucked in, right? And so you plan it perfectly, you go through the center, and as you're going down, you see another whirlpool spinning. Oh, there's another whirlpool. And I use that analogy because when we see the whirlpool, it obviously is a different form than the river, but really the whirlpool is just two different currents going in opposite directions, creating the appearance of a whirlpool. But it's really just the river manifesting itself in a different form. And we here, not just us humans, but everything that has life in it is the same thing. Everything in existence is the river. But the tree we see outside, our dog, our pets, ourselves, we're these whirlpools. And we look at each other and say, hey, on a whirlpool, good to see you. And you say, hey, Adam Whirlpool, it's good to see you too. But what we really are the river. But it's just the river manifesting itself in a way, again, that we give it a name, a label, and it's something else. And we go on believing that we're this whirlpool, not part of the river. And so we act like a whirlpool, and we make decisions that a whirlpool would make. And I love the way Eckhart Tolle speaks about, human beings being both human and being, right? In our beingness side, I relate to being of the river, and our human side is being of the whirlpool. And when we become aware, when we awaken to who we are, and we become aware that, hey, we're not this whirlpool, we're just the river pretending that we're the whirlpool, we begin to create this separation between the two, which allows us then to begin to connect intentionally more with that being side of us. And as we begin to connect more with that being side of us, our human side, which is our ego or our personality, whatever you want to call it, begins to learn how to dance a little bit better as it builds that relationship with the soul, with the beingness. And as you continue to mature that relationship, that allows you to be soul driven, and it allows you to be to make decisions, to think, to communicate from the heart space instead of from all of the variety of thoughts and behaviors and triggers and all the other things that we tend to accumulate over our lives as human beings. So that's my best answer, Brianna.
So me personally, this like I get caught up in like the like, wait, what? You go through the middle of a whirlpool? Is that like literally how you traverse whirlpools? Just curious
Yeah,
side note question. Is that how
yeah,
you handle a whirlpool?
yeah. You know, when I was a kid, speaking of North Carolina, I went to summer camp up in North Carolina, and we had a camp counselor who was a Marine, and you know how they are, hoorah! And so we're like 10 years old, and this guy takes us across the border into Tennessee, and we get on the Ocoee River, which is like one of the top, you know, like it's
I know this
intense.
river. Yes.
Yeah, so you know the Ocoee, and his name was Mickey. He's a great dude, and he's like, "All right, we're gonna be going through." We all got on this raft. He's like, "We're going whitewater rafting today," and that's how he guided us. We'd go through these massive whirlpools, and he'd be like, "All we got to do is go through the center, because if
Wow.
you hit either side, it's gonna suck you in. So you got to go right through the center," and that's what we did. And so I could be wrong, but that's how we were taught, and it worked well for us. We all survived.
No, that's awesome. Hey, learn something new every day on top of other things. Yeah, I grew up on rivers and playing in rivers and actually got sucked into like a water pocket, I think is what they're called, once when I was a kid, and almost drowned. Like I literally remember looking up and seeing like the sky and just being like, okay, so am I going to be able to get out of here? Because the river was just like holding me down and I was like stuck. And fortunately, a friend of mine pulled me out. But
Wow.
so I'm thinking like, wait, what? We go through the middle of the whirlpool?
Oh,
So
that was the trick.
I just didn't know, but that's good. And yeah, I completely agree. You know, I think that for some of us, maybe we're a little bit more naturally like on course from a younger age than perhaps others, you know, without even realizing the difference between ourselves and others or whatever the case may be. And maybe just end up a little bit more naturally soul driven, you know, or connected.
Mhm.
I love, so Adam, right? Sacred medicine, hypnotherapy, Reiki, shamanic rose healing. Like there's so many different elements to you. But of course, I want to start like your background, your beginning. Like I'm really curious to know like if you were like what you were like as a kid. And then I'd love for you to also share a bit about what brought you to where you're at now, which again is doing so many different things. But I'd love to just know more about your background. And I'm super curious to know if you were like a spiritually curious kid.
I'm real. It's interesting you asked that question. So I was a nightmare as a kid, and you know, and it wasn't. I'll lead and say it wasn't my fault, because you know I don't want to take the blame for anything that I've done. My behavior is not my responsibility. But
Of course
you
not.
know, I grew up. I grew up in a, I don't know, maybe it's a traditional family these days, but my parents got divorced at a very early age. I don't even, I must have been in kindergarten or somewhere around that time frame. I don't remember a lot of my childhood. Uh, and my mother was addicted to narcotics heavily, was
Mm,
for most of her adult life. Again, not her fault, just some unfortunate incidents that led to that. And I think most people who have addictions, they're not bad people. They just you know, life gets hard or things happen, and you know, it's just part of the path. And so, you know, they got divorced, and my dad got custody of me because my mother wasn't able to, you know, take care of me, obviously. And of course I had lots of issues, as you can imagine, from that happening as a child. And you know, when you witness your mom laying on the bathroom floor dying, uh, is a kindergarten age kid, you know, it's not a good environment to be in. And so my dad got custody of me. My dad was a brilliant jazz musician, awesome guy. He gave up his whole life to take care of me, and of course I still have some guilt for letting you know, my behavior not match the love and what he was giving me as a child. But with that said, my dad was an atheist. You know, my dad was born in 1930. Both my parents are Jewish, and my dad, being born in 1930, was alive during the Holocaust. He wasn't in Germany or Poland or Europe or anywhere where his life was threatened, but you know, he was obviously very aware of what was going on. And Jews back in during World War II times either went full on God mode, right? Like, you know, grasping onto anything they could for hope, and, you know, or they went the opposite way and said, why, if there is a God, why would God let this happen to 6 million Jews, right? So my dad went the route of the atheist and didn't believe really in anything. In fact, he was quite antagonistic to any sort of God archetype or higher power archetype, understandably so. And so, but there was just something weird about me as a kid. You know, I always felt like there was something missing, you know, from as far back as I can go. There must be a God there. There must be a higher power, something. I didn't know have the words for it. And in fact, I used to lay in bed at night, and as a kid in Florida, it would always rain, and I would close my eyes as I was laying in bed, and I would say, Jesus, if you're God, send a bolt of lightning down right now, so I know for sure it's you. And of course, no light bolt would come down. And then I would say, okay, Muhammad, if you're God, make it thunder right now. And I'd go through all the God archetypes that I knew consciously back then, and nothing ever really reared itself. And so fast forward to about high school, I end up getting dating this girl who, you know, she was a good old Southern Baptist gal, and we were dating. And one day she said to me, Adam, I have to break up with you. And I was like, why? And she says, well, because you're not Christian, and I'm afraid that if something happens to you, you're going to die and go to hell, and I couldn't live with that. And so I said, okay, well, how about I go to church and explore that, you know, because I was in full exploration mode at that point in time. I mean, I was studying Wicca, I was studying everything. I just wanted to, I was still in search of discovering who God was. And I said, and she's like, okay. And I was like, well, I don't want to go to church with you. I want to go to church on my own, and I want to go through my own path of discovery. And so I did. I started going to a different church, and I went there for about 3 or 4 months until my dad found out that I was going to get baptized. It was an Episcopalian church. It wasn't a Southern Baptist church. It was a very mellow church. And my dad called the church and threatened to sue them if they went through with it. So I stopped going to that church, and I stopped going to church until I could drive, until I learned how to drive. And when I got my car, I started going to the church that my girlfriend was going to. And so he unwittingly traded in an Episcopalian church for a Southern Baptist church, which is much more hardcore in what they believe than, you know, like brimstone and fire.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having a spiritually transformative experience in that church a few months after being there, not religious, but spiritual. And I did meet Jesus that day, and I converted, and I became a pretty hardcore Southern Baptist for many years. I became a youth director of a church, you know, so on and so forth. And then, you know, once you get into sort of the leadership roles in any, I guess in any religion, you start to see all the business behind it. And, you know, oh, the pastor needs a new car, so we need to find $7,000 for the new car. It's like, why are the tithes paying for the pastor's car? And not that anything's wrong with it. I mean, it's, you know, a church is a business just like anything is, and a pastor has to make a living. But at the time, it didn't sit well with me. So, and I got into it with the church, and I ended up leaving and walked away completely. And shortly after walking away from church in 2005, my dad died unexpectedly. And my dad and I were best friends. We had patched up a lot of, you know, the challenges we had after I had converted to Christianity, and you know, that wasn't very pleasant for a long time. But I joined the military and shipped out, and we became good friends after that. And so when he died, you know, I didn't have a mom really, so it was like losing 2 parents at the same time. And I really struggled with that loss. I didn't know how to process it, and none of my traditional religious beliefs helped me feel any better. You know, I didn't want to believe that my dad was burning in hell somewhere. He was a good man. You know, how could that be? So a good friend of mine at the time, she was a very successful restaurateur in the Phoenix Scottsdale area, an Italian lady who owned a bunch of Italian restaurants. And she says, Adam, you got to talk to my medium. I've got this medium who's incredible. You got to talk to him. He's going to connect with your dad. And I've worked with him my whole life. You got to talk to him. And I never would have considered that prior to my dad's passing. I thought, psychics and mediums were tapping into something of the devil, right? And so, but I was willing to try anything at this point. I was desperate. I was in such bad shape. And so I talked to this medium. I'll keep the story short, but he did connect with my dad in a very profound way. And he didn't know my last name. All he knew when I called him was my first name was Adam, but he just knew. And he knew things that I didn't know about my dad. And I was able to validate those things after we spoke with some of my family members and my dad's friends. And so that opened the door really onto my spiritual exploration. And that, I've learned, I didn't know what back then it's like, well, what do you call it? It's, we like to label things an awakening, right? Consciousness, but we don't, they're just labels, they're words, they're sounds. It's not what they really are. It's just how we explain them. So I began this journey of self-discovery back in 2005 that led all the way up to 2017, where I had a really powerful, call it a boost to the awakening, and began manifesting things really quickly in my life. And I discovered in 2017 I was diagnosed with PTSD related to loss. I was still struggling, and I was like, okay. And I went through this awakening, and I was like, okay, well, what do spiritual people do? How do I become more spiritual? Oh, spiritual people meditate. Okay, I didn't have anyone to talk to about this stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I ended up buying this meditation book, this guided meditation book. I ended up it was an audio book, and I ended up listening to it and meditating. And then through meditation, I discovered chakras and our energy centers and all of that good stuff. And I ended up working on myself and ended up in a few months curing myself of the PTSD that I had, that I, been struggling with for 12 plus years. And at that point, I was like, okay, well, how do I, I shouldn't even say, how do I, things just kept manifesting. And I ended up meeting people who are like, oh, you're a healer. You should, and I'm like, okay. And I met a Reiki Master Teacher who's like, yes, you're a healer and you should study with me. And I ended up studying with her. And then I had a past life regression, because up to that point, I hadn't really had a mystical experience, and I wanted to experience one. And I started to read about past lives. And Anna, I did not want to believe that we live more than one life. This life is hard, and I'm like, I can't buy into this I'm going to come back again thing. When I die, I just want to go to heaven and sing with Jesus, and be done with all of this earthly stuff. But I experienced the past life regression, which was the most beautiful thing. And I was like, okay, I want to learn how to do this to work with my, to bring to my healing clients. And so I went to hypno school and became a hypnotherapist. And I could go on and on about how the path went, but everything just kept unfolding. And here I am today. And I'm so grateful for the path and for, just everything that's happened. I see my struggles as blessings. I see my suffering as blessings. And it's really helped me to understand now, when I go through difficult times, that these difficult times are all teachers. They're all pressure on the coal that's going to, continue to turn that coal into a diamond. And it's a beautiful thing, regardless of how difficult it may feel at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I mean, it's a really powerful story. And, I also was a product of divorce, and I know how difficult that can be. And my father is like, one of my favorite people on the planet. So I still just, whenever I talk with people about who have lost their father, or who, might be losing their father, or anything like that, like I can get teary like in a second. I'm just so thankful and grateful. God and I have this thing, like I told God, I'm like, you can't have my dad until you like replace him with someone else who can be there for me, like my dad, so I can't even imagine. That'll be a tough one, even though I know as much as I do. And I'm so grateful that at this point, at least, and moving forward in my life, because I know you didn't have any of the information that you know now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back then, and how much easier that would have been for you, even though you would have, I'm sure, still experienced a lot of grief. But I think your story is really beautiful in that it really illustrates to me like the path of a seeker, you know, and someone
Yeah.
who truly is like born into a life, like knowing like there's more, there's more. And I think that's maybe why you and I like resonated so much immediately, because it was, you know, I was born knowing God, so that was never a question for me, but like I just always knew there was more to life, like everyday life. So I was like always looking for that, you know,
Yeah.
like, dude, we don't just go to school and get married and like work. Like there's so much more, you know. I was looking for the magic.
Yeah. Yeah. Missed it.
But your story is so powerful because like there's so much pain there. And the thing that I continuously hear from clients, from, you know, when people ask me questions about the Akashic records or anything, there's like, why do we have to experience so much pain? So thank you so much for sharing that, because to me, it's just, again, a really beautiful illustration of how pain can awaken us to our next steps in life. You know, it helps us become more and more conscious. And I can't even tell you how many readings I've done for people where like they lost their parents at a really young age, or
Mhm.
whatever, they lost someone really close. And it was like, if this person would have stayed in their life, they wouldn't have stepped into what it is that they're doing now. You know, like they would not
Yeah.
have awakened in whatever form that was. But those are not easy things to deal with in our present state. So I'm just so thankful that you kept going and kept searching, and like how beautiful that you freaking found this book and like did these things and healed yourself. And yeah, I just want to commend you for that, because not everyone does that, you know. They dive into the numbing agents, or they
Mhm.
go in other directions. So I'm really thankful that you fought for yourself in the midst of all of that.
Yeah, Anna, I'd like to say one last thing about pain and suffering, since we're
Yeah.
on the topic, because you may have some folks who are listening who are going through that right now. And, you know, when you get on, as you called, on the seeker's path, or once you find what you're looking for, and now you're on the finder's path, right? It's easy to see others who are on the path too, who feel like, you look at them and you're like, wow, they've got all their stuff together. And then you have a bad day where you can't get out of bed and you're just depressed, or you're whatever the case is, and you're like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I, like, I shouldn't feel this way, because knowing what I know, right? I should just be love and light, and happiness and joy. And I think there's this there's a lot of bypassing that goes on in spirituality, um, and it's all part of the path, right? I mean, I went through that piece too. Trust me, I did plenty of bypassing where I don't want to look at that, because it's going to make me sad, and I, you know, I don't want my vibration to lower, right? Screw all that stuff. You know, and what really resonated for me, what really changed the way I look at things, and I think about it every single day, and it just inspires me so much. So I was listening to I call him my guru, my teacher, Ram Dass. I have so much gratitude for that beautiful soul.
I know how much you love him.
Yeah, like Ram Dass and he's one of my guides. I see him all the time in hypnosis sessions and in meditations. He's always in medicine ceremonies. He's always with me. But he said, he was giving a lecture, and he says, yeah, a lot of y'all don't, he says, a lot of you don't read the news because it's scary and it's dark, and it's, you know, or you don't get involved in world events because, you know, you're peaceful and loving. And he said, if you think that God only exists at the mouth of the river or the top of the mountain, then you've missed it. And what I got from that, from what he said was, you know, God is everything. God isn't just happiness and joy, but God is suffering and pain. If you look at the yin and yang, right? There's light in the darkness and darkness in the light. That's the lesson. And we are not fully, we cannot become fully actualized or become whole until we accept both the light and the dark. That's what makes us who we are. And when we lose somebody, when we feel pain, in fact, that pain, that suffering can bring us closer to God than the happiest of moments in our lives. And if you think of the ego's job, let's just break this down. The ego's job is to drive us as far away from pain as it can and as close to pleasure as it can. And so if you're resting on that, call it polarity of pain, you're as close to God as you're going to get, because that's when your ego gives up and waves the flag and says, I'm done. I'm taking a time out. I can't deal with all this stuff. This is not good. You eventually break that barrier where it's just you and it's God, even if you don't realize that it's God or spirit. And so I just want to encourage anybody who's listening to this podcast who's suffering or goes through bouts of depression or suffers through anxiety. There's nothing wrong with you. Love the person, love the one that recognizes that anxiety. Love the one that,
go
go ahead. No, I'll keep rambling. So you go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I don't know if you've read the book Conversations with God. It's one of those books that was life-changing for me. It's very, very powerful, but it's a conversation between a man and God. And God talks about how we wouldn't know love if we didn't know hate, right? We wouldn't know loneliness if we didn't know companionship. Like we wouldn't know these things if we didn't know the other. Like they all go together. Yeah. And they're what helps us to appreciate, you know, like the low times help us to appreciate the high times. Otherwise, if you're just always experiencing high times, I mean, I don't know about you, but like as a kid, I would think about like I got, you know, I grew up in a Christian environment, and I would get really stuck on this idea of being in heaven for eternity. Yeah. I mean, I remember like third grade being like, eternity, like what? Like forever and ever. Like it made me tired just to think about, because I'm like, what the hell do we do? Like eternity,
worship God all day,
like knowing everything and being in like happy all the, like, what? No. And that's, you know, like, it was funny because you mentioned like, why do we come to this planet? Because it's so difficult, but like Earth is a learning planet, right? We're here to experience the polarity. That's literally why we're here, because that enables us to learn so much in such a short amount of time. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, I had the best like 2 weeks of the past several years leading up to this week. And this week has just been total shit, just total shit. And I have been like on the warpath. I'm like wanting, like, I'm depressed. I'm like wanting to like, you know, yell at people and like really being angry. And like the whole time I'm like, gosh, Rhonda, like, why can't you be like, you know, no. Like, you know, like you talk about spiritual bypassing, like this is real life, you know? Yeah. And I totally like went into the Akashic records. Like, I am so pissed because why does it have to be this extreme? Like, why is this like, why we get both of these? But, you know, this is part of life. This is part of living. And when we really are able to break it down, there are different things that are going on, you know, that bring that in, but pain is part of it and it sucks. I am not a fan. I definitely would like to run in the other direction oftentimes, but you know, I know it's the same exact for you, that like all of the most profound, incredible things in my life have come after moments of extreme pain, heartache, those kinds of things. And I think that if people are able to be objective about their own situation, that they would see, you know, the same / similar thing. Because pain is such a powerful teacher. And it's like why poets create, you know, some of the best work when they're like down.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's just, yeah, it's part of being human. Go ahead.
I was going to say, you can even think about Jesus, right? Let's take it back to Christianity, right? Now, whether you believe in Jesus or as God, or you believe he was a enlightened master whose words got misinterpreted, but let's just assume the Jesus archetype. Jesus knew who he was, right? Jesus was realized, but even on the cross, what did he say? He screamed out in pain, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?
Yeah.
Jesus got angry in the temples and flipped the money tables. If it's good enough for, and this has sort of become a mantra for me in a lot of ways, it's good enough for Jesus, then it's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Why do I have higher expectations of myself than Jesus? That's like impossible.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if we look, I really resonate. I think it's one of the reasons why I felt so close to Ram Dass or even Alan Watts is they expose who they are. They don't paint this picture of being, I'm this perfectly enlightened being. I sit in my white clothes with the halo over my head and I will anoint you. And it's like, yeah, let's talk about when I'm in meditation and I'm thinking about having sex, right? Ram Dass talked about that. He says, I remember, he's like, I would go to these meditation retreats where we would meditate for 12 hours. And after 12 hours, after a couple hours, your mind just starts to wander. And the master would walk up and down, making sure we weren't moving. And Ram Dass is meditating just fine. But inside my mind, I'm thinking about having sex. He goes, but he doesn't know that. The guy, the guru who's walking back and forth doesn't know that. He tells these stories about his own vulnerabilities. And it's like, yes, that's being soul. Let's talk about being soul driven. Let's just be who we are. Let's just be comfortable in our skin. Let's just be comfortable with where we're at.
Yeah, it's very important. It's very important. But that's not, even within the spiritual community, and you and I were kind of talking about this a little bit beforehand, there's so much misconception about, how things are like all light and love in the spiritual community. And it's just as real as every other day out there,
Mm-hmm.
Really, I mean, for me, I think that certainly my mission is helping people to connect with their spiritual self in whatever way that takes shape. That's not up for me to judge or guide. That's why I bring on so many different folks onto this podcast. But because when we do go through the hard times, then we have beings we can lean on. We have practices we can utilize
Mm-hmm.
to help us get through it easier. But it's definitely not in an attempt to bypass.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk with you about your hypnotherapy work, because you just published a book about near-death experiences. And Back to the Beyond, exploring near-death experiences through hypnosis. And I want to chat a little bit about near-death experiences, but I'm super curious, and I've always been curious about lives between lives. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know that book, Many Lives, Many Masters.
Many Masters.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I remember reading that book and I was kind of like, I was a little bit sad, or I don't know, a bit bummed out when he talked about like the between lives. I feel like maybe not a lot, but it
Mm-hmm.
just felt like it was weird. The imagery that I got was very like dark, and like people are just like waiting in line, and like it's not this like, I don't know, it's just kind of like people are like just like waiting in line to go type of thing, which I'm like, that's not. And that may have just been my perception at the time. It's been several years since I read the book, but I'd love to know more about lives between lives, and just if you can give us a little bit of an overview about like what happens in between our lifetimes.
Yeah, for sure. So if you want to get a really good understanding of life between lives, I recommend reading Destiny of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, who really was the he's the one who I don't want to say discovered it, but he was sort of the originator, the founder of life between life regressions. And it was the first book on hypnotherapy that I'd ever read. And it's the book that inspired me to go to hypnosis school, or to seek out the past life regressionist here, which led me to go to hypnosis school. And, what a life between life regression is. So let's first talk about what a regression is. So in hypnotherapy, people think of hypnosis and is you go to the fair, right? And I'm going to have the pendulum, and when I count to the number 3, your eyes are going to be closed and you're going to be in deep, deep sleep. And then, when I count to the number 3 and snap my fingers, you're going to bark like a dog, right? So, there is hypnosis, which is suggestion-based hypnosis. So people who are looking to lose weight or stop smoking, or they have some kind of behavior they want to stop, hypnosis is can be good for that, which is essentially just suggestions, right? So once you're in the hypnotic state, okay, Anna, next time you have the urge to grab a cigarette, instead you're going to go to the refrigerator and you're going to grab a carrot, right? And so you go into this subconscious mind and you reprogram these behaviors, right? Now that's hypnosis. And hypnosis works great if there's no underlying trauma or experiences that are causing those behaviors to exist, right? Like I just started eating chocolate one day because my friend gave me a piece and now I'm hooked, right? Okay, I need to stop eating chocolate. That may be something you can work through with hypnosis. Hypnotherapy is actually therapy. And the way it's practiced is through what's known as regression. And what regression means is going backwards, right? So I was doing so great, but I regressed this week, right? It just means you're going backwards versus progress, which is to move forward. And so in a regression, you go back, which is in current life or present life regressions, you go back to maybe early childhood memories. In a past life regression, you go back to regress back to past life memories. Now, if you believe that we live many lives, because not everybody does, but if you believe in the concept of reincarnation, there are different thoughts on it, right? Like the traditional Buddhist belief or Tibetan belief is the universe is playing a game of hide and seek with itself, right? And when it plays hide, it comes to life as us and forgets that's who it is. And when it's done playing hide and seek, it goes back to being God until it wants to come back again, right? So this is constant. It's a very simplistic way of explaining it, but it's back and forth, back and forth. And so with between lives regression, it's a little bit of a shift from what perhaps, and I'm not an expert on Tibetan or Buddhist. I'm not sure how much they believe in these aspects of it, but with a past life, you live a life, and after that life is done, you die. Your physical body dies. And just like we all expect to happen in this life, when our body dies, we move on to wherever we go next, right? Wherever that plane or whatever that dimension is. Now, in reincarnation, before, at least is life between lives explains it, is you live a life, your body dies, and then you go to this dimension or realm for a little while, in between coming back to the physical realm, to the earth realm, or wherever you go. Maybe you go to a different planet, right? Who knows? But in between lives, hence the between lives, you have this experience wherever you go. Now, I say wherever you go because between lives can be totally different for everybody. There's not like one place. You just don't show up at Home Depot and I need some lumber, right? It really just depends. And so what between lives can help you, what a between lives regression can help you understand is, I guess the best way to say it is, when clients want to have a between lives regression, we set the intention that it be a regression that helps explain things that are going on in this current life, right? And so what ends up happening is they go back to a past. So the way I conduct my between lives regressions is I take the client back to a past life that is most relevant to the current life. And then at the end of the past life, they experience their death and they experience then going into the beyond, if you will. And from that, wherever they go, and we explore that, whatever their memories of where they went to. And sometimes people go to different places after each life. So it just really can depend on what happens after their physical body dies. But I've seen everything from, oh, I'm with Jesus, or I'm with my spirit guides, or I'm with my family, and there's my dog who I lost when I was like 2 years old. Other people's experience blending back into part of all that is just becoming pure consciousness. There's a variety of different things, but one of the reasons people like doing the between lives regression is to understand and learn who they are and to figure out, why did I come here? What's my purpose in this lifetime? And so in my experience on it, not everybody gets to the between lives space. It really just depends. And my philosophy on it is, if your soul wants you to access that dimension and realm and to get those answers and to experience that, then you'll go. If it's not meant for you to experience, then you won't. And so, but it's a really beautiful experience for people, because they really get to, more so than a past life regression. A past life regression, you sort of discover, wow, I've lived many lives. Wow, this is really cool. I am an eternal soul. But then when you go to the other side and you get a witness to the buffet of beautiful things that exist in the place that we call home, it's a whole other thing. And it's truly an incredible experience.
That's awesome. Thank you for breaking that down. So it sounds like doing like a between lives regression then is really to help understand the current lifetime primarily, correct? And like a past life regression would be focused on just kind of getting a overview of like where you've been, what you've been through, maybe definitely giving you like insight to some things that you're dealing with now in this
Yeah,
current lifetime. I know in the
yeah.
Akashic records, a lot of times they'll bring up past lives,
Mhm.
that are like, well, your heart is, very closed in this lifetime because of this and this and this that happened in your past lifetimes.
Mhm.
Um, so I can see that fitting. So why is it that you chose to focus your book on near-death experiences? You said this was
Yeah.
like all the rage right now. So are like, is this a very common thing?
So near-death experiences, as I mentioned earlier, when I was going through my journey after my dad passed away, I was looking for anything. And obviously, the medium being able to connect with my dad was really important for me to, have the belief that no, we don't go to hell if we don't believe in Jesus, right? And that there is, that he's alive and well, and he's, and that was great. But and as you know, on the seeker's path, especially when you come from a traditional religious background, it's easy to just like, yeah, but what if that was just a bunch of hooey,
For
right?
sure. For sure.
And so it's like, okay, well, I need more. I need to learn more. I need to just, and it's like once you experience, it's like what's the Pringles? Once you pop, you can't stop. So like once you have that first potato chip, right? You want more and more and more and more. So it's like, okay, I need to learn more about this stuff. And I uncovered, I used to listen to this talk show. I think it's still on. It's called Coast to Coast AM. It's on ungodly hours between like midnight and 3 a.m. And I think truckers mostly listen to it, when they drive in at late nights. But I used to stay up and listen to it. And they have people on of all different kinds of like shadow. We're going to talk about shadow people today, or we're going to interview people who used to work for the government, who are part of the shadow government. It can tell us all about what's going on behind the scenes, and people who remote view and all this cool stuff. And it was all really fascinating because it's all mystical things. They're all topics that, UFOs and aliens. But one of the most interesting areas that they touched on for me were near-death experiences. And I became fascinated with near-death experiences. And I just read, story after account. And there's one type of near-death experience, and I talk about this in my book, Back to the Beyond. I try and educate people on what a near-death experience is, what a past life is, and all this stuff, just to kind of warm people up for for the story itself. But with there's a certain type of near-death experience called a vertical NDE. And a vertical NDE is when somebody briefly dies, they leave their body, and they go somewhere, which allows them to bring back new information that they didn't have before they died, right? So one famous example of this is, and I can't remember the woman's name, but she had gone in for emergency surgery. They gave her anesthesia. When you go into a surgical room, they tape your eyes shut. They don't want your eyes opening up in the middle of surgery, right? So they literally tape your eyes shut. So
Oh,
she's in the
wow.
surgical room. Her eyes are closed. She's full of anesthesia, eyes taped shut. They do the procedure on her. They take her back into her room. And when she comes to, the doctor's asking her how she was. And she says, you know what? I saw those sticky notes that you were placing on the monitor by the wall in the operating room. And she was reading, she told him verbatim all of the messages that were on the stickies that were on the monitor. And the monitor was completely on the other. There's no way, even with her eyes open, that she would have been able to see the tiny little writing on those. But she verbatim read everything. And the surgeon was interviewed by this legitimate news organization. It wasn't like a spiritual magazine. It was a real. And he's like, "There's no way she could have known that. There's no way. Her eyes were never open." As a doctor, he's like, "I can't explain how she knew it. I'm not going to say she had a near-death experience, but I can't explain this through science." And you see that a lot in near-death experiences where people will come back. they'll meet someone on the other side, let's just say, who's a family member that gives them information about something in their family that they had no idea about before. And they come back and they ask about it and find out, oh yeah, that's true. There's all kinds of these veridical experiences, and that really helped me to believe, and it really helped heal a lot of the anxiety I had about death, that, okay, we really do move on. And so, you know, once I learned hypnotherapy and I began practicing past life regression and so on and so forth, you know, I actually had discovered that people who have near-death experiences have two challenges. So number one, oftentimes they come back from their near-death experience and they begin going through what I call a dark night of the soul. Because I mean, imagine you get in a terrible car accident, you're in incredible amounts of pain, you die, you go to the other side, to a place that most people describe as home. You're surrounded by infinite love. You're just in this amazing place, and then you're sent back. And now you wake up and your body's crushed or whatever, right? Near-death experiences typically don't occur from a happy situation. And people don't want to be here because life is hard, right? Like, I want to go back home. I want to be where I was. So they go through this tremendous, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Why did I have to come back? And they struggle with and agonize with that question. And then there are other people who had near-death experiences like 15, 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and they don't remember key parts that they want to recall. And when I say key parts, key messages, things that they were told by, they met Jesus or an alien or whoever, that they just can't recall. And so I was driving in my car one day, because that's where all my ideas happen. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I can take people back to a past life or a current life memory. I should be able to regress people back to their near-death experience and have them be able to re-explore that. So I had no intention of writing a book at the time. I was just interested in doing some research to see if this was something that was doable. So I belonged to a couple of near-death experience groups on Facebook, and I just posted a call. I'm like, hey, I'm really interested in conducting this research. If you've experienced a near-death, an NDE, you know, and would like to go back in time, if you will, and re-experience it, you know, reach out to me and let me know, and we'll have a conversation. So I had a bunch of people who reached out, and I picked I think 10 people all together, and I used 7 of the accounts, but all 10 were able to go back. And what I found, what was really interesting about the near-death regressions that were different than the past life regressions. You know, in a past life, you go back to a past life. In a between lives, you go back to a space that you visited in between a lifetime, 2 lifetimes, right? In a current life, you go back to memories of the current life. But with near-death regression, what I found out is they weren't really being regressed. They weren't going backwards to a memory of when they died. They were actually being transported back to the dimensions realms they visited after their physical body died, but brand new, fresh encounters with even new beings. It just, the best way to say it is allow them to go, to just leave their body again and just go wherever they felt inclined to go, which was totally different than what I had expected to happen. And these people, these volunteers were able to get the answers to the questions that they had. And imagine somebody who's just struggled with 15 years of, why did I have to come back? And just agonizing over that. And they get a simple response to their question. It might be, it's not for you to know, or you already know the answer, or you'll know in time, or your purpose in life is to love. Simple answers, right? Nothing like, oh, well, you came back to be a NASA astronaut and land on the moon and, you know, discover life, right? But these simple answers are enough to change people's struggles for 15, 20 years. So for me, near-death experience, working with near-death experiences was a way for me to pay back this community for all the work, all the help that they gave me and sort of overcoming my fear of death. And now I'm really fortunate. I'm starting to work with IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. They've reached out to me, they read my book, and they're like, we want to work with you. I'm going to be leading workshops, and I'm already working with some IANS members for near-death experience regression. And it's just been really a beautiful unfolding in terms of you know, just watching the universe open doors. So it's been a true blessing, this path. It's been an absolute blessing.
It's really interesting because I didn't realize, like, I want to read your book now is really all I have to say.
Well, it's cool because the book has, so, you know, the chunk of the book are the accounts, the near-death experience accounts of 7 people who I regressed. So you get to actually hear in their own words. It's a transcript of their account. And then after their account, you get to read through the entire regression session. So it's not me writing about the regression session. You're actually reading the transcript of, you'll see the question I asked, and then you'll see the person answer it. And you really get a sense for, wow, this isn't just this dude making up this nonsense, right? So you really get a full picture of it.
It's like Dolores Cannon's books, which I don't know if you've ever read those, but oh my gosh, I've read so many. They're extremely fascinating. And I always appreciated the fact that, yeah, just share a transcript, because why not? Why would you ever try to summarize those kinds of things, you know? So your book is coming out, and I know that, like, well, your book is already out, sorry, but you've got this, like, also like this TV show that that's gonna be coming out as well, right?
Oh, the documentary?
The documentary.
Yeah,
for the near-death experiences.
Yeah, it's not necessarily for near-death experiences. It's a gentleman who, he's a filmmaker, and he's got a film company, and he's worked on lots of big movies, which is very exciting. But he suffers, I shouldn't say he suffers, but he struggles with a paralyzing fear of death. And so he wanted to create this documentary movie on that basically chronicles his pursuit of trying to get the answers to what happens after we die. And so for this documentary, he interviewed, you know, people from all different backgrounds, you know, priests, pastors, rabbis, you know, imams, people like you and me, you know, to try and get like a full 360 view of different people's beliefs and discovery. So yeah, he came down to my healing studio here in beautiful Stillwater, Minnesota, with his film crew, and we recorded. And it was it was an awesome interview. But then after the interview, I facilitated a past life regression on him. And they recorded the past life regression. I'm not sure how much of it he's going to show, because what he discovered about a past life might not really be ready for prime time. But it did explain his terrible fear of death in this life, which is really brilliant. And so yeah, it was really cool to be a part of that, of this documentary that's coming out in 2023. But it was even cooler to see this guy who he calls himself the ultimate skeptic, right? Regardless of how much information he processes in his brain, right? It's this constant skepticism of what he's seeing and even what he's experiencing. I mean, the guy experiences this paranormal stuff that anybody else would be like, dude, really? Like, how do you not believe? And he's still very much a skeptic. But when he came out of the past life regression, he sent me a message saying, Adam, I really have to process this, because he's like, this is not what I expected. He's like, I didn't think I'd really, he's like, I'm really struggling with this because it's so real and I don't know how to take this all in. And for me, that was even better than being in this documentary, because it's like you see somebody's eye start to open up.
Like, yeah.
You know, it's really cool. So that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I totally, I mean, I've worked with people before who are like, Akashic records or whatever. And yeah, to see them like completely change or just like kind of make that big shift. And especially if it's this person who's been really kind of, you know, very much one way, super skeptical, then that's huge, because I feel like your mission is similar in that, like, you just want to introduce people to their spirituality, to the fact that there's more, you know, to the fact that like what we see is it's just a part of it. So I want to make sure we respect your time. And unfortunately, of course, I knew we weren't going to be able to get into all the things. So let's go ahead and dive into the lightning round. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. All right. So question number 1, what is the one habit that you can't live without?
The one habit I can't live without. Wow, that's a good one. Oh boy. I guess if it's a vice, cookies. I love cookies. That's like my, I can give up sugar and be done for 6 months and walk into a room where there's freshly baked chocolate chip cookies and my dieta is officially broken. So I admit I'm a Law and Order. Law and Order is probably my other habit that I can't kick. I just can't get enough of old Law and Order SVU episodes.
My partner, like one of his nicknames for me is Cookie Monster. So I feel you.
Awesome. I knew we were kindred souls at many different points.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I definitely have a problem as well. Number 2, what does spirituality mean for you?
Oh boy. I think at the end of the day, spirituality to me is remembering who we are. I think the seeker's path is mostly spent looking outside of ourselves for God. And as Alan Watts so brilliantly said, if God was to play the ultimate game of hide and seek and he wanted to hide someplace where no one would find him, where do you think he'd hide? Well, he'd hide in each of us because we never looked there. And so I think spirituality is or awakening, to me, it's very similar, they're very synonymous with each other, is sort of going back to remembering who we are. And I think I know this is a lightning round, but we can touch on this isn't just for people who believe in the things that you and I believe in. People who believe in Jesus, who have a really not religious, but faith, right? When they fall in love with Jesus, and people are going to call me a heretic here, they're actually falling in love with the part of themselves that they're remembering, that they're projecting is this Jesus moment. And because even if that sounds like a heretic statement to make, even the New Testament says the kingdom of heaven is within you. Well, what does that mean? When you accept Jesus, he comes into your heart. Okay, great. What does that mean? It means God's inside you. And so you're connecting with who you are. It's just different ways. It's just different layers of the onion. It's just maybe not different layers of the onion, but it's different sides of the coin. It's still the coin. There's just different sides to it.
Aspects of us, different aspects of us. We're all connected.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Number 3, what is your advice to anyone who's looking to find purpose?
Ooh. Well, number 1, I'll say you're already living your purpose. We all walk around, what am I supposed to be doing here? And the reality of it is if you look back on your life and you look at where you are now, you can see how all of the different pieces of your life have sort of this beautiful tapestry of that you can clearly see how each of those different decisions that you made or experiences you had have led you to this moment where you are right now. We're always right where we're supposed to be, even if we feel like we're not, even if we feel like, oh man, I'm an alcoholic or I'm a drug addict, right? Sounds terrible because because there are things that as society we don't have tolerance for, we don't accept. But what if there's a lesson we're supposed to be getting from the alcoholism or from the drug addiction? That might be your purpose for right now in this life. So number 1, we're always living our purpose, regardless of where we are. And number 2, for those who are looking for a little bit more tangibility behind that answer, I always like to say, think back to when you were a kid. Like, what did you like doing as a kid? And it's interesting for me because I went through the same process where I was like, okay, what's my purpose? And along the path of my spiritual awakening, right? It's like, okay, I'm not this person who I used to be anymore. So now what am I supposed to do with my life? And I remember I was thinking back and I was like, wow, as a kid, I was a magician. I took magic lessons and I would do kids' magic parties. And 13 years old, I'd walk around restaurants and go to different tables and do card tricks. And that's I fell in love with magic, and I lost that love when I got older, and I was like, well, okay, I'm too old to do kids parties anymore. It's a little creepy. But now I look at what I uncovered with all of this mystical, beautiful, spiritual, whatever you call it. And I'm like, well, this is magic too. And it's like, oh, now I understand. Now I understand. I love this. Like what I was doing as a kid was sort of a manifestation of of what my true life's passion is, my purpose is, which is to experience things that are far greater than myself. And so that's my own journey. That's my own purpose. What your purpose is, I would definitely look back to your childhood. And what did you really feel drawn to? What did you really feel a connection to? And then just use that as your intention as you seek to find out your purpose in this life. And this is I shouldn't say in this life, but in the stage of your life, or this part of your life.
Awesome. Okay. And last question. It's a really big one. Are you ready?
I hope.
Where can people connect with you online?
Yeah. So if you're interested in reading Back to the Beyond, you can get it really cheap. I think Amazon's selling it right now for $12. But you can go to backtothebeyond.com or go right to Amazon, which is backtothebeyond.com/Amazon, and you can purchase the book. You can find adamdince.com, which is my personal website. If you're interested in learning more about my healing services, you can go to sacredstairwayshealing.com. And I just released a brand new, if you're an energy healer, or if you're looking to become an energy healer, I just released a new online course, which you can take, and you can find that at rosehealingcourse.com, and you can learn how to become a sacred rose healer. And once you finish the course, you'll get a certification, and you'll be fully equipped to use roses to heal people's energetic, mental, and physical bodies.
We'll just have to have you back to talk about that, because we didn't even get into it. I was like, okay, where are we going to start?
There's only so many minutes in a podcast.
So only so many. All right, Adam, thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me on. It's an honor.
All right, folks, if you were inspired by today's interview, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify. Be sure to subscribe and sign up for the email list, where you'll get podcast updates, promotional information, and other helpful resources. Have an incredible week. And don't forget, when we invest in ourselves, the world benefits. Until next week.